It was 8:42 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday in November when I first realized the true depth of the glass ceiling above me. Our office conference room, ironically named Vision, was already filling with the familiar scent of overpriced coffee and ego. I clutched my legal pad to my chest like it could somehow shield me from what I already knew was coming. The glass walls vibrated with the low hum of conversation, finance murmuring in one corner, marketing tapping away on MacBooks, and product managers debating timelines in clipped, confident tones. Me. I was the executive assistant to the vice president of strategic development, a title that felt important on paper but didn't protect me from being invisible in practice. I took my seat at the far end of the table, not because I wanted to, but because it's where people like me belonged. Across from me sat Connor Hale, director of product, sharp suit, sharper tongue. The kind of man who shook hands too tightly and smiled just a second too long. Everyone loved Connor. I did, too once, until I started noticing how he never quite looked at me when I spoke, or how my suggestions during pre-meeting briefs magically reappeared in his voice, without my name. But that day, that meeting changed everything. The room settled into silence as our Chief Operating Officer, Talia NG, swept in. Always poised, always watching. She offered a brief nod before sitting beside Connor. Connor stood up, flashing that gleaming politician smile. All right, folks, let's kick off. He launched into the agenda, striding across the screen like he owned the room, which in a way, he did. A slide deck filled with bullet points I had helped assemble flicked across the projector. I wasn't credited, I never was. 15 minutes in, he paused mid-sentence. Actually, he said, turning toward me as if just noticing my presence. Emily, are you getting all this? I nodded silently, pen already in hand. He smiled, then chuckled loud enough to earn a ripple of laughter from the room. Good. That's what you're here for, right? The room erupted, chuckles, grins, raised eyebrows. That moment lasted, maybe 5 seconds. But it burned. I stared at my notebook, cheeks flaming. The letters on the page blurred as my throat tightened. Every cell in my body screamed, get up. But I stayed seated, smile frozen, hand moving, pretending to take notes, while trying not to cry. You're just here to take notes. I kept replaying it in my head, over and over again, like a cruel mantra. Connor didn't look at me again after that. I don't remember much from the rest of the meeting. Something about Q4 metrics. A budget revision. A side conversation about launching in Berlin, but all I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. As everyone filed out, I waited until the room was empty. Only then did I allow my back to sag against the chair. The pen dropped from my hand. I was trembling, not with sadness. With rage. It wasn't just the insult. It was the casual way he said it. The certainty in his tone that no one would question him, and they didn't. I sat alone in that glass room and realized Connor had made me a ghost. And that was the moment something shifted inside me, like a door that had been rusted shut, finally creaked open by the time I got back to my desk. The company Slack was already buzzing with post-meeting chatter. Connor had messaged me directly. Connor Hale, 9:56 a.m. Hey, make sure you clean up the minutes and send them to everyone before lunch. Thanks. Not please. Not great job on the prep. Just another directive, another expectation. But I didn't answer right away. Instead, I opened a folder labeled Strategy Deck Archives, which I had quietly maintained over the past year. I clicked through dated subfolders, each filled with versioned PowerPoints, proposal drafts, agendas, and minutes. Some of those minutes contained his direct instructions, some contained my contributions. Most were ignored, except today. Today I would write them with new eyes. By noon, I had the document ready, but I didn't just write down what happened. I documented it, objectively, clearly, with timestamps and quotations. Meeting minutes Tuesday, November 14, 8:45 a.m. Connor Hale begins the meeting with a presentation on Q4 targets. 8:51 a.m. Hale acknowledges Emily Saunders, EA2 VP Strategic Dev, and requests her to take notes. Remarking, "That's what you're here for, right?" Laughter noted among team. No objection or redirection from attendees. I included everything. Not to embarrass him, at least not yet, but to preserve the truth. Because truth, as I was beginning to learn, could be a weapon. I sent the minutes to the usual thread, Kana, Talia, the department leads, and internal comms. Then I did something I had never done before. I copied in the CEO. Marissa Klein. She had only been in the role for 3 months. I'd seen her exactly twice, once at the welcome brunch, once in passing in the elevator. But what I did know was this: she was notorious for catching the things no one else saw. Her first act as CEO was replacing 2 senior VPs for cultural misalignment, quietly, efficiently. And I wanted her to see this. Subject: Meeting Minutes, November 14. Strategic Review from Emily Saunders to Strategy Team. Marissa Klein Attachment. Q4_strategic review_minutes.pdf body. Please find attached the minutes from this morning's meeting. Let me know if you need anything further. Best, Emily. I stared at the send button for a long moment. Then I clicked it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking my phone. Part of me feared I had crossed a line, committed career suicide. Another part, the stronger part, knew I had simply held up a mirror. At 2:14 a.m., my phone buzzed. Marissa Klein, thank you for this. Let's chat later this week. I have some thoughts. That was all she wrote. But it was enough to tell me I had been seen, and for the first time in a long time. I felt like I had just begun to write my story, not someone else's. By the time Thursday came around, the anxiety had settled into something sharper: anticipation. I spent most of the morning trying to act normal, replying to emails, organizing a team lunch calendar no one really cared about, and reordering printer toner. Meanwhile, I kept glancing at the tiny message from Marissa Klein on my phone. Let's chat later this week. I have some thoughts. What did she mean? Was it a warning? An opportunity? A reprimand cloaked in civility? The office had a way of pretending it was friendly: potted plants, open seating, kombucha taps. But underneath, everyone moved like chess pieces on a board built from silence and politics. You didn't challenge hierarchy. You didn't bring attention to yourself unless it made your superior look good. And I had copied the CEO. I didn't tell anyone, not even Amanda, my closest friend at work and the only other assistant who'd seen me cry once in the break room after a particularly brutal review. I couldn't risk it. This had to be mine, a silent rebellion with no audience. Just me and her. At exactly 11 a.m., my Slack pinged. Marissa Klein, Emily, do you have 15 minutes to stop by my office? 11 o'clock to 11:15. Now's good if you're free. I froze. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I replied. Yes, I'm on my way. My hands were damp. I quickly checked my reflection on the dark screen of my monitor. Hair neat. Blazer buttoned. Breath held. Her office was on the 30th floor. A sleek, minimalist corner with wide windows that made the skyline look almost fragile. I'd only been up there once, for an intern welcome event. As I stepped off the elevator, the carpet hushed my footsteps. The receptionist greeted me with a curious glance and waved me in. Marissa was standing near the window, holding a mug. Her gaze was calm but calculating, like she saw more than she let on. Emily, she said, smiling. Come in. I sat on the edge of a chair across from her desk, trying not to grip the armrests too tightly. I read your minutes, she said, returning to her chair and folding one leg over the other. Twice, I swallowed. Thank you. There's something rare about clarity, she said, setting her mug down. It doesn't scream, it doesn't accuse, it just reveals. That's what your notes did. They revealed something. I waited, unsure of whether I was being praised or gently pushed toward an exit. Marissa leaned forward slightly. You've been in your role how long now? 3 years. Almost 4, I said. And you report to Simon Patel, VP of Strategy. She nodded. And Connor Hale, you work with him often. More than I'd like, I admitted before I could stop myself. That made her smile. Honesty. That's another rare quality. There was a pause. She studied me for a moment, not like I was a threat, but like I might be holding more than I showed. I want to be very clear with you, Emily. I don't tolerate humiliation, disguised as humor in my leadership team. What happened in that meeting was unacceptable. My chest rose. A breath I didn't realize I'd been holding all week finally released. But here's what I'm curious about, she continued. Why now? Why speak up this time? That question pierced something deep. I wasn't sure how to answer at first. I think. I began slowly. I've spent a long time hoping someone else would notice. That if I just did my job well enough, eventually someone would say, hey, she deserves better. But they didn't. And then he laughed and everyone laughed with him, and I realized I'd become part of the furniture. Silent, useful, invisible. Marissa nodded once. And you didn't want to be furniture anymore? No, I whispered. I didn't. She leaned back and looked out the window for a moment, as if considering something bigger than just me. Then she reached into a drawer and pulled out a sleek folder. I'm in the process of restructuring how we do strategic planning. I want someone who can help audit project integrity, oversee internal process reports, and ensure leadership accountability. My heart kicked in my chest. I need someone who sees details, who knows the language of meetings, what's said and what's meant. Someone who's been listening. She slid the folder toward me. It's a temporary assignment. Internal, quiet, but visible. I stared at her. You want me to work with me from the inside, help me watch the rooms you're already in, document, decode, clarify. I blinked. But I'm not. You're not just anything. Emily, that's exactly why I'm asking. The words caught in my throat. I opened the folder. It wasn't a promotion. Not yet, but it was a key. A door. A path off the margins. If you accept, she said, you'll report directly to my chief of staff. Starting Monday. Quietly. No announcements. I looked up, and Connor, a small knowing smile touched her lips. Leave him to me. By the time I left her office, I felt like my legs were made of electricity. On the elevator ride down, my reflection stared back at me in the mirrored doors, the same blazer, the same hair, the same eyes, but something fundamental had changed. I wasn't just the note-taker anymore. I was the one who listened, and now, the one who would be heard. Back at my desk, Connor strolled by. He didn't say anything. Just a glance, a smirk, as if he still believed he owned the room. He had no idea what was coming. And that's when the idea formed, quiet and sharp as broken glass. If Marissa wanted me to document what was real, then I would. Every conversation, every misstep, every performance he gave in front of others, and every slip behind closed doors. I didn't want revenge. I wanted recorded truth, undeniable, indisputable, and impossible to laugh off. This wasn't over it. Had just begun. The next Monday. Felt like walking into the same building through a completely different door. No one knew anything had changed. Not Amanda. Not Simon, and definitely not Connor. But everything in me was different. I wasn't just showing up to take notes anymore. I had been given access, permission, purpose, and with that came clarity and caution. I reported that morning to Natalie Kravitz, Marissa's chief of staff. Natalie had a presence that made you sit straighter without knowing why. Severe glasses, clipped sentences, always scanning like she was 5 steps ahead. She handed me a discreet email alias, emily.saunders_ops@internalcompliance.company.com. Use this address only for reports or internal documentation, she said. This doesn't go in Slack. If you need to meet Marissa in person, I'll schedule it. Otherwise, everything goes through me. The title was unofficial, Strategic Compliance Liaison, but Natalie made it clear this was more than just internal cleanup. It was part observation, part intervention. There are fractures in the culture here, she said, without looking up from her iPad. Your job is to find them before they splinter. And just like that, I became a ghost with eyes. A quiet observer, in the same rooms I used to be invisible in, only now. I was listening differently. That afternoon, I was back in the Vision conference room, another strategy meeting. Another performance by Connor Hale. He had no idea. He walked in late, of course, tie loosened just enough to look relaxed but not sloppy. He flashed his teeth at Simon, then glanced in my direction. Emily, he said, tossing his phone onto the table. You've got this down by now, right? I didn't react. I clicked my pen and nodded once. Already writing. What I was writing. 3:06 p.m. Connor, Hale dear. Product arrives late. Remarks. You've got this down by now, right? Tone, dismissive. No acknowledgement of delay. The meeting moved forward. I logged who interrupted whom. Who took credit for what? Who rolled their eyes? Who tuned out? I caught a moment where a junior developer's idea was cut off mid-sentence, then echoed minutes later by the lead designer. Praised this time. I recorded all of it. This wasn't about emotion now, it was evidence, language, power dynamics, accountability. Later that evening, after most people had left, I sat at my desk alone, organizing my notes into a file labeled, Confidential Observations. Week 1, I attached the document to an encrypted email and sent it to Natalie. 30 minutes later, I received a reply. Natalie Kravitz subject, noted good start. Marissa reviewed the notes. She highlighted the developer incident. Follow up on that next time, ask them what happened. And they weren't just reading my observations. They were tracking outcomes. That night, for the first time in months, I didn't feel small. I felt useful, dangerous, empowered, but the universe has a cruel sense of timing. The next morning, Amanda pulled me aside near the copy machine, eyes wide and voice low. Hey, what did you say to Marissa? I froze. What? Connor's freaking out. He didn't say it outright, but apparently Marissa pulled him into a closed-door meeting yesterday. He came out looking like someone told him his stock options were gone. My stomach flipped. Amanda leaned in. Did something happen at the meeting last week? The big one. I hesitated. You were there. She nodded. Yeah, I heard what he said. I just didn't think Marissa would get involved. She didn't say anything to you. No, but the department's buzzing. They think something's coming. I forced a smile. No idea. Probably nothing. She narrowed her eyes, but dropped it. I returned to my desk, heart pounding. The air had shifted. I could feel it in the way people whispered, in the way Connor didn't swagger past my desk like usual. But I wasn't ready to stop. If Connor was sweating, he should be, because now, I wasn't just documenting him. I was investigating him. By Thursday, I had created a system, color-coded logs for every department meeting, private notes summarizing recurring patterns, a strike file, a growing document of repeated behaviors. Connor appeared 3 times already, talking over female team members. Delegating tasks, then claiming ownership, humiliating remarks in group settings. And it wasn't just me noticing. I began reaching out carefully to others. I caught Leah, the junior developer who had been interrupted, outside the elevator. Hey Leah, I said, casual. Just wanted to say, I thought your point in Monday's meeting about the dashboard simplification was really strong. Surprised it didn't get more attention. She blinked. Oh, thanks. Yeah, it was weird. Connor cut me off. Then 5 minutes later, Brian repeated it and suddenly it was innovative. She laughed bitterly. Story of my life. I nodded. That happened a lot. She shrugged, embarrassed. Kinda. Honestly, I stopped trying to speak up in those meetings. It's like they only hear you if you're loud or a dude. I smiled gently. Thanks for sharing. I added it to the strike file. Verbatim. That week, Natalie sent me an unexpected message. Natalie Kravitz. Marissa wants a sit-down next week, 1-on-1. She says you've earned it. 3 weeks ago, I was humiliated in front of my colleagues, reduced to just the note-taker. Now, the most powerful woman in the company wanted to meet with me, 1-on-1. But something was shifting in Connor too. He was quieter in meetings, less smug. He watched me now, not with curiosity, but with suspicion, like he could feel a threat but didn't know where it was coming from. On Friday afternoon, as people were leaving early for happy hour, he stopped at my desk. Hey, he said, casually leaning on the cubicle wall. I looked up. Hi, you've been busy lately. I tilted my head. Same as always. His jaw tensed, but he smiled. You've got a good memory, Emily. I've always said that. No, I said calmly. You never did. His smile flickered. He straightened up, and for the first time, I saw it. The crack, the panic, just a flash in his eyes. He walked away without another word, and I realized, he knew something was coming, but he had no idea how much I had already seen. I used to believe that silence was the price of stability, that if I stayed in my lane, did my job, and didn't cause waves, the water would stay calm. But now I saw the truth. The silence wasn't peace, it was complicity, and the water. It had always been rising. After 3 weeks of quiet documentation, whispered side conversations, and double-checking my blind spots, I'd gathered enough material to draw the outlines of something bigger than just one humiliating meeting. What I had was a map of patterns, and patterns told stories. Connor Hale wasn't just arrogant. He wasn't just careless. He was strategic in his dismissal of people. And most dangerously of all, the system let him be. I arrived early on Monday for my 1-on-1 with Marissa Klein. Natalie met me in the lobby outside the executive wing. She didn't smile, but she nodded, which in Natalie language meant you're ready. Marissa's office, as always, was minimal perfection. Light, space, silence, the opposite of the noise Connor always made. She greeted me like an old colleague. Have a seat, coffee. No, thank you, I said. She noticed you're sharper today. I smiled. I've been paying attention. She sat across from me and rested her hands on her desk. "I've reviewed everything," she said. "Your observations, your documentation, the witness mentions. You've connected threads no one else bothered to tie." I swallowed, because I was always in the room, but no one ever saw me. Marissa leaned forward. "They're seeing you now." My chest tightened. "Part pride, part fear," she continued. "This is where things get real. If I move on this, if I bring what you've shown me to the board or to HR, it sets a precedent. A director being called out for hostile culture by an assistant. It will shake this place." "I understand." I nodded. "But truth has gravity. Eventually, it pulls everything into it." Marissa smiled for the first time. That's exactly what I needed to hear. When I left her office, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt charged, like someone had passed me a live wire and dared me not to flinch. I spent the rest of the day reviewing my documentation again, refining wording, cleaning up entries, double-checking timestamps. Every word mattered now. Every comma, because now, what I had written might change things. At 5:43 p.m., I sent a single file to Natalie. Subject, Pattern Report, Hail, C. Summary attached. Final documentation weeks 1-3 includes direct quotes verbatim from meetings logged, behavioral trends, first-hand observations from affected team members, Slack messages, internal tone review recommendation, cultural conduct review, leadership revaluation. He stared at the send button for a full minute. Then I clicked it, and, with that, there was no going back. 2 days later, everything cracked. It started with a calendar update, an Alta meeting. Mandatory. 3 p.m. sharp. Connor walked into the room with a strange stiffness in his posture, like someone holding their breath. Marissa followed minutes later. Silence fell across the room. She stood at the head of the table and looked around. "No presentation today," she said. "No metrics. We're going to talk about something else. Respect." My pulse spiked. "We've conducted an internal review over the past month," she continued. "I want to thank those of you who contributed honestly and confidentially." Connor looked like he'd been slapped. His eyes darted toward me, not with confusion anymore, but recognition. He knew. Marissa went on. "A leader in this organization has repeatedly demonstrated behaviors that do not align with this company's values: dismissiveness, public humiliation, patterned interruptions, gendered language. We have verified this not through accusations but evidence." Gasps, murmurs, shifting chairs. Connor opened his mouth but said nothing. Marissa looked at him, calm and unflinching. "I will not name names here, that's not what this is. But I will say this. A culture of fear, subtle as it may be, ends today. Leadership isn't loud, it's responsible. And if you believe you are entitled to silence others, you are not a leader. You are a liability." She paused, then added, "There will be changes in department leadership, effective immediately. Details will follow." Connor stood. "Marissa, if I may," she held up a hand. "This is not the time for spin. Connor, we're not in a pitch room. Please sit." He did. Slowly, red-faced, small. For the first time in years, he was the one shrinking in the room. I sat quietly, at the end of the table, taking notes but no longer just the note-taker. I was the catalyst, the proof, the whisper that became a voice loud enough to shake the table. That night, I found a handwritten note in my inbox from Natalie. Asterisk, he's stepping down. Officially transitioning to advisory capacity. We don't promote revolution here. We promote results. Asterisk, well done. N asterisk, I held the note in my hand for a long time. And for the first time in my career. I walked out of the office not wondering how people saw me but knowing I had changed the view. Not by shouting, not by fighting, but by doing what I'd always done: paying attention. Only this time, I made sure someone listened. Asterisk, the day after the meeting, the office was quieter than I had ever seen it. It wasn't the usual silence of people focused on work, it was the hush that follows a thunderclap, a mix of awe, fear, and adjustment. Connor's name wasn't spoken out loud, but it hovered. The calendar update came through at 9:17 a.m. .org. Change announcement, effective immediately. Connor Hale will be transitioning out of his current role and into an external advisory capacity during Q4. Department operations will be led by interim management, with strategic oversight from the executive team. He was gone, no goodbye email, no team gathering, just a disappearing act, corporate style. Amanda passed my desk shortly after the announcement dropped. She looked at me sideways. You knew, didn't you? I blinked. About what? She gave me a look. Emily, come on. You've been different for weeks. Something happened. I hesitated. Then quietly, I said, let's just say. Sometimes, people finally get tired of being stepped on. Amanda's eyes widened, but she didn't push. She simply smiled. Well, whoever pulled that off, I owe them lunch for the rest of the year. I didn't answer, but inside, I felt the slow bloom of something rare. Power, not the kind that comes from a title or corner office, the kind that comes from knowing you changed the ending. The fallout came in waves. First, the confusion. People asked questions no one could answer. How did it happen so fast? Who made the call? Was it personal, political? Second, the rumors. Someone said HR got a complaint. Someone else claimed Marissa overheard something. One theory even said Connor was leaving for a better offer. That one made me laugh. Third, the adjustment. Without Connor, the meetings actually flowed better. People finished their sentences. Junior team members spoke up. The interruptions stopped. Leah, the junior developer, came by my desk a few days later. She smiled shyly and dropped a folded note. Inside was a post-it with 3 words. Thank you, truly. I didn't respond in words, just nodded and smiled. We understood each other now. A week later, I met with Marissa again. No formality this time, just us, seated side by side in her office. You did well, she said. You understood the assignment. I just told the truth, I said. No, she replied. You told it well. That's what most people miss. She handed me a sealed envelope. Open it later, she said. You've earned it. I thanked her and left. When I got home that evening, I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. And an offer. Effective immediately, we would like to extend a formal offer for the role of Strategic Culture Analyst. This role reports directly to the office of the CEO, and will support continued internal monitoring, reporting, and transformation of leadership culture. We believe in the unseen voices. You made yours impossible to ignore. Tears stung my eyes, not from sadness, from validation. I had spent years taking notes for people who never learned my name. Now I would be writing the playbook. The next day, I moved into a new workspace, a quiet office on the 28th floor. Nothing fancy, but it had a door, a nameplate, a window, a place where I could work uninterrupted. Respected Amanda stopped by on her break, holding coffee. So, what do we call you now? She grinned. Emily the Avenger. I laughed. Just Emily. She raised her cup to just Emily, who took down a Titan without raising her voice. We toasted with paper cups and quiet pride. I thought of Connor often in those first few weeks, not out of hatred, but reflection. He had power. But he never realized what true power was. Being watched and still choosing to do the right thing. He'd underestimated the one person who watched everything, and I'd made sure the right person listened. Months later, I sat in a leadership training session, this time not as a shadow in the room, but as a guest speaker. I stood in front of a group of new managers, all wide-eyed and eager to rise. I told them a story, not with names, not with vengeance, just the facts, the silence, the choices, the ripple effect of small cruelties, and the quiet revolution of being aware. One young woman raised her hand. How do you know when to speak up, when the risk is worth it? I looked at her, saw my old self in her face, and I answered, when the silence starts to feel heavier than the consequences. They nodded. Some wrote it down, and I smiled. Because this time, someone else was taking notes, and I was the one being heard.